Public Affairs very much thanks Residco, our sole corporate underwriter, for helping to make the production of this show possible.
We are here with John Catanzara. He is the president of the Chicago FOP. We're taping this on October 4th. And the short of it, John, is that the city has gone to hell in a handbasket. And it's gone there because crime is completely out of control. I might say and get away with it. It is effing out of control, right? And so, John Catanzara, since you are the president of the Fraternal Order of Police in Chicago, what do we do? Who could fix it, and how do you get them to do it? I know you can't do it, John, but somebody could tell me the answer.
Well, I think we're at a unique crossroads with an opportunity here. We have a new mayor, and I know a lot of people are skeptical, including myself to some degree, about where we're going to go with this. But he did pick the right superintendent of police. And Superintendent Snelling has the ability to not only educate the public, but educate this mayor on how to make this city safer. And I think he's going to be a godsend to the men and women of the Chicago Police Department, which is going to translate to a safer Chicago for everybody. It just will.
You're sure he can do it? He has the authority. He's been given enough leash rope by, what's that guy's name? Brandon Johnson? He's the nominal mayor. The guy's thought to be, well, I don't mean this too harshly, Brandon, but people think at best you're a socialist, at worst you're a communist. Would that be fair?
To describe him as that?
Yeah.
Well,
Am I being too harsh?
Well, I think maybe initially his policies haven't dictated that quite yet. Well, I think the jury's still out on what his policies are really going to be.
Put that aside. You can be a socialist, you can be a communist. Can that guy, Brandon Johnson, give enough rope, enough freedom to Larry Snelling so he can do what's necessary to make Chicago lots safer?
Well, I'm not going to pretend that I know Larry Snelling that well. We certainly have had great conversations over the years that I've been president. I have no doubt that Larry Snelling would have never taken that job had he not had some assurances from Mayor Johnson that he was going to have the ability to run the department as he seemed fit to kind of restore the common sense dynamic that's been missing for quite some time.
First 30 days. He's been there how long now? About a week? 2 weeks? How long?
A week.
A week. So that's 7 days. Let's give him 30. What can he do in the first 30 days that you can say, I'm right, he's going to have an impact?
Well, I think he already did one thing by eliminating the forced overtime initiative that have been heaped on our members for years now that has been driving them crazy. And it's been the subject of a lot of grievances and arbitration and complaints from the FOP's perspective on behalf of the membership. And with the stroke of a pen, Larry Snelling eliminated that provision and that incentive.
That provision did what?
The forced overtime. They called it tier deployment. So in 2020, where everybody was getting canceled, and our members understood, the city was up for grabs, it was burning to the ground. Nobody was going to complain about the forced overtime. But then Eric Carter and David Brown abused it in 2021 and just started using it every chance they got.
What does that mean?
They would force members to work overtime.
Oh, forced overtime. So just willy-nilly, they'd be paid for
correct.
overtime. Was it time and a half or double, depending?
Unfortunately, we don't have a double time opportunity.
But you have a time and a half for overtime.
Well, the time and a half, and that's been a proposal on our end and a complaint that time and a half used to be a disincentive for the city to force people to work overtime. It used to be voluntary almost 99% of the time, except for obviously championships, the Bulls, the Sox, the Cubs. And then in 2018-19, it started to change where forced overtime became a little more and more normal.
The superintendent of police could say you must work overtime.
Correct.
And you would be compensated time and a half.
Right.
But a lot of cops, for one reason or another, didn't want to work that
Still
overtime.
didn't want to. So we were asking it to be double time to get more volunteers. That fell by the wayside.
Okay. So anyway, so a stroke of the pen, that policy is now gone. The superintendent of police can't say to police in Chicago.
No, he still can.
He still can?
The tier deployment was a structured kind of calendar of what units would be working on what day. So if you were working in the TAC district in the 4th district, you would be working your first regular day off one time every 2 or 3 months, and you'd be knowing which day off was going to be canceled. they call it tier deployment. He has eliminated that whole thing, so there is no more forced overtime with the tier deployment. There's still voluntary opportunity for everybody.
Okay. So that's a big deal.
It's a huge deal.
The cops are appreciative.
Correct.
Their morale is boosted.
Well, it was boosted when Larry got named as superintendent and confirmed this is just his first major step that the troops really are saying thank you.
Well, so we hear just in the last few weeks, I think I've seen multiple times on our local networks, on the 10 o'clock news, which I watch frequently. There's a robbery and there were 4 cops, not a few cops, maybe 2 cops, but there were 4 bad guys. And they saw this and they were on it and they were chasing him and in a car, in a police car. And then they saw there were 4 guys and they described it to the sergeant and they were long guns. For some reason, long guns are like it's an assault weapon, okay? You can comment on that later. But so the sergeant says, back off. I've heard that. Am I right?
You're right.
So back off, and we know what these folks do. They go to the next robbery. They do, for some reason, the criminals have decided recently there are scale economies, what economists call scale economies. If you're going to do 1, do 4, it's more efficient, okay? So they go from 1 to 1, Lakeview. You do it within a few blocks of each other, and now they know, hey, doesn't matter. We don't have to. We take our time. We're not in a hurry, right, to get out of here. I mean, I'm mocking it a little bit, but is that now the policy of the Chicago police? We seldom will do a car chase, a foot chase. If you're a bad guy and somebody's coming after you and they're a policeman, step on the gas because 9 times out of 10 they're not going to chase.
9 times
right?
out of 10.
10 times out of 10.
You can go literally 29 times out of 30. Okay. And the criminals know this. And God rest her soul, that's exactly the kind of scenario that cost Ariana Preston her life. Was a robbery crew just transiting the whole south side of the city, robbing everybody they could in a short period of time. And she happened to just run across the wrong crew. But specific to your policy perspective and the foot chase policy. So when we first had conversations with the city of Chicago and the police department in general about their proposal for a foot chase policy, they had a document to us. It's 13 pages long. And I just started laughing. And they asked, what's so funny? It's 13 pages. Who in their right mind is going to process 13 pages of do's and don'ts in the middle of a foot chase? It makes no sense whatsoever.
But it's not even up to the cop. It's up to somebody. They got to call and say, can we chase by foot? Right?
Well,
they've got somebody in their ear.
The simplest.
Isn't that right?
Yes, but the simplest, well, to a degree, when it comes to vehicle chases more than foot chases. Foot chases are a little more autonomous and up to the individual officer.
Such as the Adam Toledo case. It's a well-known case. People remember that. Tell them in 20 seconds. You be the host. What happened in Adam Toledo? What led up to it? Just tell us. You can do it. Take a minute.
The reality is Adam Toledo was participating in an attempted murder of a vehicle driving by of what they perceived to be opposite gangbangers. There's no other way to describe what was captured on PodCam, and that triggered a shot spotter alert in which the officers responded to.
They flooded to the scene.
To the scene where the shot spotter said.
And they saw somebody running.
They saw 2 people.
Two people. Right?
Yes, the only 2 people on the street.
Did they see somebody hand the gun to the kid?
Not initially. Obviously, they went to stop the 2 people who were the only people out where the shot spotter said the calls were coming from. And at that point, they went to detain both people, and that's when the separation occurred and the gun was passed. And at that point,
they saw that.
Officer Stillman could clearly see the gun in Adam Toledo's hand as he was running down the alley.
He didn't know how old Adam Toledo was.
No one could have known. And why should it matter?
Should it matter?
No, it shouldn't
matter. If he was
matter.
7 years old, he's as dangerous as if he's 17?
Absolutely.
In this case, he was 13, right?
Doesn't matter if he was 77.
He's got a gun, he's dangerous.
Correct.
So he chased him. What was the policeman's name?
Eric Stillman.
Eric Stillman. Did Eric Stillman make that decision on his own, based on the circumstances you described, to chase after the kid who turned out to be Adam Toledo?
Correct, because he believed him to have a gun initially, and as he started chasing him, he could see the gun in his hand.
And nobody tried to stop him. Maybe nobody even knew what he was doing. Was there a sergeant monitoring all this?
Well, the foot chase policy was not in effect at that point.
But now there would be.
I'm sure there was a sergeant monitoring the foot chase. But again, when you're saying I'm chasing a man with a gun, 99 times out of 100, no supervisor is going to call that off.
And so what happened? Why is it so notable now? Give us the denouement.
Well, because it
end.
was some poor 13-year-old kid who apparently was on his way home from graduation ceremony
No, but
and
wait.
on his way to church.
So what? And as he's chasing, as Stillman is chasing him, right? And the kid's going to stop, and he eventually does. What happens?
It's simultaneous ditch the gun as
the
Eric
kid
Stillman
got, like-
commits the shoot.
So he probably tosses the gun, thinking maybe I'll get away. They won't notice I toss the gun. He does. He holds up his hand. He turns around, and the cop thinks he's holding up his hand. I guess he's not going to wait to see what's in there, right? Or well, actually, let's give the critics the best scenario. Why didn't Stillman, on seeing this, he's turned to him? Is he kind of giving up? Is he holding his hands up? Hands up means okay.
He may very well have been giving up.
Yeah.
But the officer has no obligation to be fired upon before he decides to fire. If you know there is an armed offender you are chasing and that person is turning on you, you do not wait until the gun is fired. You know, Ariana Preston returned fire at the same time she was shot. You know, Andres Vasquez, who was murdered in the same situation almost that Eric Stillman in Toledo occurred. The offender turned around and shot Andres as he was coming up to him. He got the shot off first, and tragically Andres lost his life.
You don't know. When he turned, he didn't have time to wait and see. If he had waited, he would have seen there was no gun there. But if there had been a gun there, he might have been shot and killed.
Correct. And the reality is, Eric Stillman's trigger control and use of his weapon, I have never seen a more disciplined approach by a police officer. He fired one single round in that simple split-second instant he had to decide on whether that gun was still there or not, and had a center mass shot in the spot you want it, and did not pull the trigger a second time because he had automatically processed the gun was already out of his hand.
Okay, so then there's a procedure, there's a protocol. They went through that. After they went through that, was there the disciplinary board who decided whether there was an issue here, or did they
Copa.
decide?
It was absolutely Copa.
Copa, and what
Andrew
they decide?
Kirsten.
What they decide?
That he needs to be fired,
He needed to be fired.
even though Kim Fox passed on the charges, surprisingly.
So Kim Fox wasn't going to prosecute this, but Copa said you should be fired, and that's subject to a review by the superintendent.
Correct.
And the superintendent at that time was,
David Brown.
and he said
He did not concur.
we're not going to fire this guy,
Correct.
and that was the end of it. We thought, right?
No, there's a process.
There's an appeal of the superintendent's decision by Copa.
There's an automatic referral at that point to the police board. The police
Chicago
board
Police
then
Board, okay.
assigns randomly, I stress that, to one person. And that one person then gets to decide, did the superintendent meet the burden to overcome the recommendation from COPA or not?
And that person said no.
And that person was the president of the police board.
And that person said, we think he should be fired. And so that decision was made to fire him?
That decision is then made to go to the full police board for a full hearing.
Is that where it
which is
stands
where
now?
it stands now.
What do you think will happen ultimately?
There's no way Eric Stillman is going to be ultimately fired for this incident.
So he'll be back on the force,
Correct.
which you think is a just and righteous decision.
1,000%.
Anybody disagree with you? Larry Snelling, does he agree with you, do you think?
I don't know to begin to know Larry Snelling is a use of force expert. He has given testimony in court as such.
So you think he would agree?
I think he absolutely understands the use of force in that situation because the department concurred with
Should he
Eric.
comment on this? He may not have to. He's not blocked from doing it. If he wanted to raise the morale of the police department, should Snelling say, I've looked at this, I'm the expert you just said?
I think that might
No
be a
problem.
bridge too far for him to get engaged to an active police board.
He could do
hearing
it,
like
but
that.
you don't think he should.
That might be a little too much expectation.
Okay. Brandon Johnson's not going to get involved in this? We don't know. You're going to get
Who
involved
knows?
in this? What do you say?
Listen, I'll defend Eric to my last breath, and he knows that. I was there the morning it happened, and I've been with him ever since. And he's had some very serious struggles over this incident. Listen, this kid was literally heartbroken. He instantly gave this kid CPR trying to save his life.
He's a conscientious cop. He wants to stay a cop.
He
Right?
was, yes, absolutely. Eric is a great cop. Eric literally went out of his way for kids in the 10th district.
So, folks, we're spending a lot of time on this, maybe too much. But this is important, isn't it?
Yes.
Because when you say, I don't know how, remember when Lori Lightfoot relatively early on made some decision that the cops decided she didn't have their back, and so there was some event she went to, and I remember the cops turned around and showed her They're back, right?
Ella French's murder.
Yeah, they did that because they decided Lori just doesn't have. So this is important. You tell me, how important is this thing? How people react within the police department and elsewhere to what Eric Stillman did here.
I used a simple analogy. I could tell you, Jeff, I'm going to slap you in the face right now. And I could slap you in the face in less time than it took Eric Stillman that he had to decide whether he was going to be shot or not. And that's the standard that we are now Monday morning quarterbacking his actions by. It's unfair, it's unrealistic, and it's just a dumb standard to use.
So we got, in the olden days, I think the system of policing and law enforcement entailed investigation, arrest, detain, prosecute, a trial, law and order. We've seen law and order.
What's this trial you speak of?
Yeah, a trial and a sentencing, and then if it's a severe violent crime, probably not probation, which means nobody sees any time in jail or prison. And no, there would be a real sentence, maybe 3 years. You know, it's a violent crime. Somebody was raped, somebody attempted. It was a dangerous situation. Now the sentence is often probation, which means nothing. And if you do some time, there's a parole, you're out soon. And there's nothing, there are no consequences. That's my point. There used to be consequences to criminal behavior. You were a cop for 25 years, right?
26.
26. Were there consequences for how long of those 26 years when you were a policeman, were there consequences to illegal behavior?
You know, I think the slope really kind of started slipping, at least in Cook County, tragically around the Laquan McDonald shooting, and Anita Alvarez's integrity was questioned at that point. And I think that's when the creep really started to set in, that accountability was some kind of bad word, and that the police were the problem now, and we had to start giving the criminals the benefit of the doubt more times than we have.
Who should be accountable?
The person creating the situation and doing the actions. It's always that decision. They hold the same standard. The accountability goes to the police officer who does something wrong. It's not, you don't give it to the person who they rob, so to speak. When like a Ronnie Watts is robbing drug dealers, do you say then, oh, poor Ronnie Watts, it was the drug dealers that were tempting him by flashing the money in his face. What else could he do but take the money? No, we don't make that standard when it's the police, so why would we do it for the criminals?
So you do these basics that I said. I don't know where I got it, you know. You investigate. The police are good. You have detectives. That's part of their job, investigating, right? And they work with, presumably, the state's attorney. That's how it happens on Law and Order, right? The law enforcement, the police, work with the attorneys, and they put together a case. They are there as prosecutors. There's a defender, okay? But when the police decide there's probable cause here, along with the DA or state's attorney, that's a joint decision. They're going ahead. There was a crime here, right? We're investigating it. And at some point, it's turned over to the state's attorney here of Cook County to prosecute. Because there's a public defender. Her job is not to be the public defender. Her job is this righteous? Is this a righteous prosecution, right? Isn't that the question?
Absolutely.
Now, with state's attorney Kim Foxx, does she do that?
No.
What does she do?
I think her first consideration, more times than not, and it's got it progressively worse, is why did this person do it? Can we figure out an excuse or a reason why they did it? And try and basically set up a defense for them.
She's trying to set up a defense for the public defender. Is that what she's doing?
More times than not, it sure seems that way.
Hey, have you ever had a conversation with state's attorney Kim Foxx?
Not in person. Not even over
Would
the phone.
you like to?
No.
It wouldn't be productive.
I'd be a waste of my oxygen.
But you've heard of her conversations. You've seen her publicly. You think you know her, right?
I think I know she's a victim every time you ask her. I think she feels persecuted because the FOP is mean and racist because she plays the victim all the time. So why would it be any different for the people that she's supposed to prosecute to treat them the same way and think that there's some victims? She forgets about the actual victims far too often.
So the city of Chicago, law enforcement, Cook County, have to start treating criminals as criminals, not as victims. Would that be fair?
What a concept, huh?
You knew people who were running for mayor who said that, right?
Mm-hmm.
You knew Paul Vallis, right?
Yes,
You endorsed Paul Vallis, right?
correct.
He believes in that, right?
So did
Treat-
so did my friend Willie Wilson.
So did your friend. Those are two people running for mayor who clearly believe treat criminals as criminals, not as victims, right?
Correct.
Were they the only two of the 9 people running for mayor in the last go-around?
No,
Others? Could you name them?
Alderman Lopez was another one that was pretty outspoken about
But he wasn't running
accountability.
for mayor. He did for a short while.
No, he was for a short while.
For a short while. But he, of the ultimate 9 who ran, I guess the first election was in February, I believe.
Correct.
Of those 9, anybody else other than Willie Wilson and Paul Vallis who believe we should treat criminals as criminals?
Whose actions dictated that their words really meant something?
Right.
No.
Yeah, no, okay. And Brandon Johnson doesn't believe that, does he?
I mean, he's made comments to the contrary, so it's kind of hard. You know, I know he believes.
What did he say
what
about young
says.
people? Well, these flash mobs, whatever we call them. He lectured folks, I guess including you and other policemen. Somebody called him, I don't think, maybe it was Brandon came up with baby Al Capone.
No, the reference was thugs. He translated that to calling them baby Capones
Oh, so somebody said they're thugs. What were they doing that
or
was
gangsters
thuggish?
or whatever. And
What were they doing that was gang-like or thuggish or whatever?
mobbing downtown. I mean, that's it was a
Kicking
mob of
people if they got down?
Absolutely. Harassing,
Violent.
taking
These
over
were not
intersections.
these were not nonviolent crimes, right?
Correct. I mean, they may not have been extremely violent or weapon violent, but they were absolutely, there was some violence there.
But Brandon thinks, hey, these are young kids. They're simply misguided. Treat them well. They'll reform on their own. Would that be fair?
Yeah, and I understand to a degree what he's trying to say, but I just don't necessarily think it's going to be a productive outcome if you follow that policy. By saying if you give them something to do and give them options, that they're still not going to do bad things.
So we don't have to speculate. You know, you've heard of WirePoints, right? You see some of their
Yes.
work, right? So they say crime in Chicago continues to rise in 2023, outstripping last year and pre-COVID 2019. Okay? And people, you can see this, you see it up on the screen. 2023 line is way above the 2022 line, above the 2019. In short, if you don't look at graphs a lot, it just means crime is going up each year, right? Continuing. Pre-COVID, it was going up. COVID's going up. Post-COVID is going up. There's no end in sight. And Brandon, he's been here. He came, was May 15, right? June, July, August, September. That's 4 months. Crime lessening, you think? Has he done it? He's a new mayor, a new sheriff in town, sort of.
Listen, they'll use a stat, and everybody plays games with stats in theory, but they'll use the stat that homicides are down. That very, very well may be true, but carjackings are not, robberies are not, and those kind of things are quality of life issues that make everybody in this city feel less safe. And whatever the stats say, you still have to talk about perception because people's perceptions become reality. And the average Chicagoan will tell you Chicago does not feel any safer today than it did 4 months ago or a year ago.
And the data back that up from WirePoints, because you're right, they put the data out. You know, Chicago 2023 crime is up 29% versus the same period last year. So through September 17, 23 compared to September 17, 22. Yes, crime is down. No, excuse me, murder is down 17%. Excuse me, 11%. Murder is down. So when we had a hearing, you were at this hearing, Jim Jordan was here, the Democrats were on the same committee as Jim Jordan. They said they wouldn't show up. The Republicans did. They called it a stunt, right? You were there. Was it a stunt?
No.
We saw several people get up and talk about their brothers being murdered. Was that a stunt?
No. And the stunt was an accusation towards me specifically for hosting this event, which all we did was provide a venue for the event to take place. Yeah. Someone made a phone call, made the ask, and I said yes.
That was like the wrong thing, that you might be a president of the Fraternal Order of Police and you actually might believe in law and order. Boy, I could understand why they'd be upset, couldn't you? I mean, okay, so WirePoints put this out, yes. So there's a report that comes out because your folks are talking about, and other speakers there and other people, about crime being up. And they say, what does the city say? The city says crime's down. Murders are down, a few other things. And what does NBC? They just report it. They just report it. They say, the city said this. They didn't say it's a fact. But if Trump said something, hey, we just fact checked this in 10 seconds, and what did we find? It ain't true. But this, they wouldn't fact check. Hey, give a call. Wire points. Is this true? Well, no, because you got this chart here. Yeah, murder's down, but criminal sexual assault's up, and robbery's up, and aggravated battery's up. Some lot, but 4% is okay. 24% for robbery is okay. It's not okay.
You're focusing on the wrong aspect of that stat. It might be an incremental increase, but it was a high number last year, and you're going on top of it. We're not talking about 4% of zero. We're talking 4% of a big number.
But what didn't we find? The arrest rate is an average of 5%, 32% for murder, but like 3% for criminal sexual assault. So if you don't arrest, those figures don't get put in here, right?
Well, but it's even broader,
or maybe they do as a reported crime, but the arrest figures are going to be off. But here was the other motor vehicle theft. You know, NBC could have had this, went up 86% in the last year.
And it was already high.
These carjackings were high, but they went down because criminals figured out it was safer for them to steal the damn vehicle rather than carjack. They still carjack. Criminals have a brain. If we incentivize things and let them know they can get away easily with the motor vehicle theft, no, they carjack less. Not completely, but stopped. I mean, is this any way? NBC, ABC, CBS, come on here. We'll take you on. I'll take you on. We'll let John go. Okay? Yeah. Sorry, yeah. So, yes, folks, I have trouble remembering where the camera is, but it's right there. I mean, I'm really losing it. I'm losing it. I mean, how many times can a man turn his head and pretend that he just doesn't see? How many times can ABC, CBS, WGN, local Fox pretend that they don't see these charts? 30% increase in crime in the last year. Motor vehicle thefts up 100% plus this year. So it's now 80 a day. Is that sexy enough for you to report? It was 40 a day. I mean, 26 of the nation's 30 most murderous cities in 2022 were run by Democratic mayors. Is there,
That's racist according to Lori Lightfoot.
26 mayors? Why? Because they're all black?
That was her defense.
I didn't say they were black. I said they were Democratic.
I get it.
Okay, John Catanzara, president of the Fraternal Order of Police, Lodge Number 7, also known as the Chicago FOP. You come back.
Will do.
And you come back next week and every week to Public Affairs.